Standing in my sister Madison's bridal suite, clutching my phone with my daughter Emma's college fund account open, I watched $15,000 disappear from our future. My mother Carol stood beside Madison, both demanding I transfer the money immediately for last-minute catering costs. When I refused, saying this was Emma's education money, Madison's face twisted with rage. She lunged toward my 9-year-old daughter, who was sitting quietly in the corner, grabbing Emma's golden braids and yanking her head back violently. The sickening crack of Emma's skull hitting the marble wall echoed through the room. The sound of Emma's head striking that cold marble wall will haunt me forever. My precious daughter crumpled to the floor, her small hands instinctively reaching for the growing knot on the back of her skull. Blood seeped between her fingers as she whimpered in confusion and terror. Madison wasn't finished. Her wedding dress, an elaborate creation of silk and pearls, swished around her as she reached down and grabbed Emma's long blonde hair again. This time, she dragged my baby girl across the polished floor of the bridal suite like she was nothing more than a rag doll. This spoiled little brat doesn't deserve college money when my special day is ruined. Madison shrieked, her voice reaching a pitch I'd never heard before. The veins in her neck bulged as spittle flew from her perfectly glossed lips. Do you know how much this wedding cost? Do you have any idea what I've sacrificed? I tried to rush forward, maternal instinct overriding everything else, but Carol grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. Her manicured nails dug into my skin as she pulled me backward. Madison deserves this money after everything our family has sacrificed for you, Carol hissed in my ear. Her breath smelled like the mimosas she'd been drinking all morning. You've always been selfish, Sylvie. Even as a child, you only thought about yourself. Emma was sobbing now, her small body shaking as Madison continued to drag her toward the 3 marble steps that led down to the main reception area. The sound of her cries cut through me like shattered glass. My daughter had never experienced violence before. She was an honor student, a quiet girl who loved reading and painting watercolor flowers. This brutality was incomprehensible to her innocent mind. "Please stop," Emma gasped between sobs. "Mama, make her stop. It hurts so much." Madison's response was to slap Emma across the face with her free hand. The sharp crack echoed through the room, leaving a bright red handprint on my daughter's pale cheek. "Ungrateful little witch," Madison snarled. "Your mother owes me this money. I've been planning this wedding for 2 years and I won't let her ruin it because she's too cheap to help family." The wedding planner, Jessica, chose that moment to walk through the door carrying a clipboard and wearing a headset. Her professional smile faltered immediately when she saw Emma bleeding on the floor and Madison's twisted expression of rage. Oh my goodness, what happened here? Jessica dropped her clipboard, the sound clattering against the marble. Madison's demeanor shifted instantly. She released Emma's hair and smoothed down her dress, but her eyes remained cold and calculating. "Nothing that concerns you," Madison said sweetly, though her voice carried an unmistakable threat. "Just a little family disagreement. You know how emotional weddings can be." Jessica's eyes darted between Emma's injured form and Madison's fake smile. I could see the internal conflict playing across her face. She was clearly horrified by what she'd witnessed, but Madison was her client, and wedding planners in this town depended on referrals from wealthy families like ours. "If you value your career," Madison continued in that same sickeningly sweet tone, "you'll forget what you think you saw and focus on making sure my reception runs smoothly. One bad review from me and you'll never work another high-end wedding in this city." Jessica's shoulders sagged in defeat. She picked up her clipboard with trembling hands and backed toward the door. "Of course, Miss Patterson. I'll just check on the flower arrangements." As soon as Jessica left, Madison's mask of civility disappeared. She turned back to Emma, who was still curled on the floor, blood matting her beautiful blonde hair. "Get up," Madison commanded, nudging Emma's ribs with the pointed toe of her designer heel. "You're making a mess on my floor." Emma struggled to her feet, swaying slightly from the head injury. Carol moved to block my path again when I tried to go to my daughter. The bridesmaids, Sarah and Katie, had been watching this entire scene unfold from their positions near the vanity, where they'd been applying last-minute touches to their makeup. Neither had said a word or made any move to help. Now I understood why. They weren't friends of Madison's at all, they were accomplices. Sarah, a tall brunette in a lavender dress, actually smirked as she watched Emma struggle to stand. "Honestly, Sylvie," she said while reapplying her lipstick, "it's just $15,000. Madison promised us Gucci bags if we could convince you to be reasonable. Surely your sister's happiness is worth more than some hypothetical college fund." Katie Shorter, with red hair piled high in an elaborate updo, nodded in agreement. "Emma's only 9. She has years to save money for college again. Madison will never have another wedding day." The casual cruelty of their words hit me like a physical blow. These women were talking about my daughter's future, her education, her dreams as if they were meaningless. Emma had been saving birthday money and allowance in that fund since she was 5 years old. She wanted to be a veterinarian, and she'd been researching colleges with good animal science programs for the past year. Madison grabbed the heavy crystal vase from the center table, the one filled with white roses that had cost $300. She held it above her head like a weapon, her eyes fixed on Emma. "Last chance, Sylvie," she said, her voice deadly calm now. "Transfer the money or I'll give Emma something to really cry about." The crystal vase caught the afternoon sunlight streaming through the bridal suite's floor-to-ceiling windows, casting rainbow prisms across the walls like a beautiful threat. Madison's grip tightened on the ornate vessel as she positioned herself directly over my trembling daughter. "You want to know something interesting?" Sylvie Carroll's voice carried a note of satisfaction that made my skin crawl. "Madison and I have been monitoring your bank accounts for months. We know exactly how much you have, where you keep it, and when you access it." The words hit me like ice water. "What are you talking about?" Carol pulled out her phone and scrolled through what appeared to be screenshots of my banking information. Account balances, transaction histories, even my automatic savings deposits were all there in stark digital clarity. "Remember when you had that car accident last spring?" Carol asked conversationally, as if we were discussing the weather. "You gave me your financial information for emergency contacts just in case something happened to you and Emma needed access to funds." My stomach dropped. I had trusted her completely. After my ex-husband abandoned us when Emma was 3, Carol had stepped in as the helpful grandmother figure. She'd offered to be Emma's emergency contact at school to handle my affairs if I was ever incapacitated. I'd been grateful for the support. "You've been spying on me." I whispered, the full scope of the betrayal beginning to dawn on me. "We've been protecting our interests," Madison corrected, lowering the vase slightly but keeping it within striking distance of Emma's head. "Do you think it's fair that you get to live comfortably while your sister struggles to pay for her dream wedding?" Sarah laughed from her position by the mirror. "Those designer bags Madison promised us, they're not free. We've been working on this plan for weeks, figuring out exactly how to approach you, what pressure points would work best." Katie added, "We researched your schedule, your emotional triggers, even Emma's school activities. We knew you'd be vulnerable today, caught off guard in front of family." The door opened again, and this time it was Derek Madison's fiancé. I'd always found him charming in a superficial way with his perfectly styled brown hair and expensive suits. He worked in finance, or so he'd told us, and always seemed to have money for lavish dates with Madison. But the man who walked into that bridal suite wasn't the affable future brother-in-law I thought I knew. His expression was cold, calculating, and when he saw Emma bleeding on the floor, he showed no surprise or concern. "How much has she agreed to transfer?" he asked Madison without even acknowledging my daughter's condition. "Nothing yet," Madison replied through gritted teeth. "She's being stubborn." Derek's face darkened. "We need that $15,000 for the catering plus another $10 for the honeymoon upgrade I booked. The suite in Belize doesn't come cheap, and I already promised the travel agent we'd have the funds today. Another $10,000. They weren't just after Emma's college fund. They wanted to bleed me dry. I want my cut first." Derek continued pulling out his own phone. Transfer $12,000 to my account right now, Sylvie, and we'll call it even for the emotional distress you're causing Madison on her special day. Emma whimpered from her position on the floor. The bleeding from her head wound had slowed, but she was clearly in pain and terrified. Her school uniform was torn and stained with blood, and bruises were already forming on her arms where Madison had grabbed her. "Please," Emma whispered, looking up at me with eyes full of tears. "Mama, just give them the money. I don't want them to hurt me anymore." Hearing my brave little girl beg broke something inside me, but it also crystallized my resolve. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about protecting my daughter from monsters who happened to share our blood. The venue coordinator, Mrs. Henderson, burst through the door in a state of panic. She was an older woman with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, and she'd been running wedding events at this country club for over 20 years. "Miss Patterson," she announced breathlessly, "we have a serious problem. The caterers are demanding final payment immediately, or they're packing up and leaving. The guests are already seated, and the ceremony should have started 15 minutes ago." Madison's face went white beneath her carefully applied makeup. "What do you mean they're leaving? I gave them a deposit." "A deposit that was apparently insufficient," Mrs. Henderson replied curtly. "They're saying they need the full balance of $18,000 right now, not the 15 you mentioned. There were additional charges for the upgraded wine selection and extra serving staff that you approved yesterday." $18,000, even more than they'd been demanding from me. Derek grabbed Madison's arm roughly. "You told me you had this handled. You said the catering was paid for." "It is handled," Madison snapped back, but I could hear the desperation creeping into her voice. "Sylvie is going to transfer the money right now." She turned back to me, raising the crystal vase higher. "You hear that 18,000? Transfer it now or Emma gets this vase across her skull." Emma curled into a smaller ball, her hands protecting her head instinctively. The sight of my daughter cowering from her own aunt filled me with a rage I'd never experienced before. But before I could respond, Carol moved to the desk where she'd spotted my purse. She dumped the contents onto the polished wood surface, scattering my wallet, keys, and phone across the expensive furniture. "Give me your phone," she demanded, grabbing the device before I could react. "I'll make the transfer myself if you won't do it." My heart sank as I realized Carol probably did have enough information to access my accounts. She'd seen me enter passwords before, had copies of my identification, knew my security questions from years of playing the trusted family member. "The banking app is right here," Carol announced triumphantly, holding up my phone. "And look at that, it's already logged in." Emma's quiet voice cut through the tension. "Mama, just let her do it. Please, I just want to go home." The defeat in my 9-year-old daughter's voice was the most heartbreaking sound I'd ever heard. But it was also the moment I realized that giving in to their demands wouldn't end this. It would only teach them that violence and threats worked. It would show Emma that bullies always win if they're just cruel enough. And then Carol's finger froze over my phone screen. Her face went completely white as she stared at the banking information displayed there. "That's not possible," she whispered. Madison lowered the vase slightly. "What's wrong? Just transfer the money." Carol's hands were shaking as she held up the phone for everyone to see. "The college fund account. It's empty. There's only $200 left." The silence that followed Carol's announcement was deafening. Madison's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and then a fury that made her previous anger look like mild irritation. "Empty." Madison's voice was barely a whisper. "That's impossible. We've been tracking that account for months. There was over $35,000 in there just last week." Carol's fingers flew across my phone screen, checking and rechecking the account balance. Her face had gone ashen, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she looked genuinely panicked. "The transaction history," she murmured, scrolling frantically. "Look at the transaction history." I couldn't see the screen from my position, but I could see Carol's expression growing more disturbed by the second. Sarah and Katie moved closer, their earlier confidence evaporating as they sensed something had gone very wrong with their carefully planned scheme. "What does it say?" Derek demanded, his polished demeanor cracking under pressure. Carol's voice was hollow when she finally spoke. "There have been transfers, multiple transfers over the past 6 months. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. Someone's been systematically draining this account." Madison's grip on the crystal vase tightened until her knuckles went white. Who's been taking the money? But I was already putting the pieces together. The timing of the transfers Carol mentioned, the way she'd had access to my financial information, her sudden interest in helping with Emma's emergency contacts. The sick realization washed over me like cold water. "You," I whispered, staring at Carol, "you've been stealing from us." Carol's head snapped up and I saw a flash of something dangerous in her eyes before she composed herself. "Don't be ridiculous. I would never steal from family." But her protest rang hollow. Derek grabbed the phone from her hands and began scrolling through the transaction history himself. His face grew darker with each swipe. "Bank of America transfers," he read aloud. "Electronic withdrawals, direct deposits to Carol Henderson Financial Services." He looked up sharply. "You've been transferring money to your own business account." The room erupted in chaos. Madison screamed and hurled the crystal vase across the room where it shattered against the marble wall, just inches from where Emma was huddled. Glass fragments scattered across the floor like deadly confetti. "You stole my wedding money," Madison shrieked at Carol. "You've been stealing from Sylvie this entire time." Carol backed toward the window, her hands raised defensively. "Now wait just a minute. That money was payment for services rendered. I've been managing Sylvie's finances, organizing her paperwork, handling Emma's school emergency contacts. I deserve compensation for my time. $33,000 worth of compensation." Derek's voice was ice cold. He continued reading from the phone. "Here's a transfer for $5,000 with the memo Madison engagement ring. Another for $8,000 marked wedding dress and alterations. $3,000 for venue deposit." The truth hit Madison like a physical blow. She staggered backward, her elaborate wedding dress catching on the broken crystal. "You used my sister's money to pay for my wedding. You told me Daddy left you inheritance money for this." Carol's mask was slipping completely now. "Your father didn't leave us anything except debt. I've been trying to give you the wedding you deserved, and Sylvie has more money than she knows what to do with. It was only fair to redistribute it within the family." Emma had pressed herself against the wall, trying to avoid the scattered glass. Blood from her head wound had dried on her neck, and she was shaking from fear and shock. Seeing my daughter like that, knowing that Carol had been systematically stealing Emma's future while pretending to care about our family, ignited a rage in me that burned away all fear. "Get away from my daughter," I said, my voice deadly calm. But Derek wasn't finished with the financial revelations. "There's more," he announced grimly. "Transfers to something called Madison Entertainment Services." "What's that?" Sarah and Katie exchanged nervous glances. Madison's face went from red to pale to red again. "That's nothing," Madison said quickly. "Just some side business investments." Derek's fingers continued working across the phone screen. $5,000 to Madison Entertainment Services every month for the past 4 months. What kind of entertainment services, Madison? The wedding planner, Jessica, had returned and was standing frozen in the doorway, clipboard clutched to her chest as she took in the scene of destruction and the injured child. "Should I call security?" she asked uncertainly. "Call the police," I said firmly. "This woman has been abusing my daughter and stealing from us." Carol laughed bitterly. "The police? You think they'll believe you? I'm a respected businesswoman in this community. I do the books for half the families at this country club. You're just a single mother with a history of emotional instability." Her words were like daggers, but they also revealed more than she intended. "What do you mean, a history of emotional instability?" Carol's smile was cruel. Did you think I didn't know about your little breakdown after Emma's father left the therapy sessions, the anxiety medication the time you called the crisis hotline? I've been documenting everything, Sylvie. If you try to cause problems for me, I'll make sure Child Protective Services knows exactly what kind of unstable environment Emma has been living in. The room spun around me. Carol had been collecting information about my most vulnerable moments, my private struggles, and weaponizing them against me. The violation felt almost as bad as the financial theft. Emma's small voice cut through the tension. "Mama, what's happening? I don't understand what they're talking about." Before I could answer, Derek made another discovery on my phone. Wait, there's something else here. A loan application, in Sylvie's name using Emma Henderson as collateral. My blood turned to ice. What kind of loan? Derek's face was grim as he read from the screen. A personal loan for $50,000 from First National Bank, co-signed by Carol Henderson, with a note that Emma Henderson is responsible for repayment upon reaching age 18 if the primary borrower defaults. Madison snatched the phone from Derek's hands. "You put a loan in Emma's name. She's 9 years old." Carol's composure finally cracked completely. "It's not a real loan, it's just paperwork, a backup plan. If Sylvie had been reasonable about the wedding expenses, none of this would have been necessary." But I was already understanding the full scope of what had been done to us. Carol hadn't just stolen from Emma's college fund, she'd mortgaged my daughter's entire future. If anything happened to me, if I lost my job or became unable to pay, Emma would inherit a massive debt on her 18th birthday. "You're insane," I whispered. "You've destroyed my daughter's life for a wedding." Carol's face twisted with anger. "Your daughter's life? What about Madison's life? What about her dreams? You've always been selfish, Sylvie. Even when we were growing up, you got everything handed to you while Madison had to fight for scraps. Growing up." I stared at her. "Carol, we didn't grow up together. You're my mother." Something flickered in Carol's eyes, a brief moment of confusion or perhaps calculation. But before she could respond, Madison let out a shriek that made everyone in the room jump. "The wedding!" Madison cried, looking at her diamond-encrusted watch. "The guests have been waiting for 45 minutes. The officiant is threatening to leave. This is supposed to be my perfect day, and you've all ruined it." She turned to face me, and I saw something in her expression that chilled me to the bone. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was the look of someone who had nothing left to lose. Madison picked up a large piece of the shattered crystal vase and held it like a knife. The jagged edges caught the light, making it clear how much damage it could do. "Here's what's going to happen," she said in a voice that was perfectly calm and perfectly terrifying. "You're going to transfer every penny you have left in every account to cover my wedding expenses. Then you're going to take out a loan against your house to pay for our honeymoon. And if you refuse..." She turned the crystal shard toward Emma, who was still cowering against the wall. "Your precious little girl is going to learn what happens to people who disappoint me." Madison raised the jagged crystal shard above her head, her eyes locked on Emma's terrified face. The makeshift weapon gleamed in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. Emma pressed herself flatter against the wall, her small hands covering her head protectively. "Please don't hurt her anymore," I begged, my voice breaking. "She's just a child. She hasn't done anything wrong." But Madison's expression had moved beyond reason. The carefully constructed facade of the perfect bride had shattered along with that crystal vase. What remained was someone consumed by entitlement and rage, someone who believed the world owed her everything she desired. "Children need to learn that actions have consequences," Madison said coldly. "Emma's consequence is having a selfish mother who won't support family." Carol moved to stand beside Madison, forming a wall of menace between me and my daughter. Derek positioned himself near the door, blocking any escape route. Sarah and Katie hung back by the vanity, but they made no move to help or intervene. The crystal shard descended toward Emma's head in what felt like slow motion. My daughter's scream pierced the air, a sound of pure terror that cut through me like a blade. I lunged forward knowing I couldn't reach her in time, but unable to stop myself from trying. And then the bridal suite door exploded open with such force that it slammed against the wall, causing everyone to freeze mid-action. Police, nobody move. The man who entered was tall and imposing, wearing an expensive charcoal gray suit that fit him perfectly. His dark hair was shorter than I remembered, and there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there in high school, but I recognized him immediately. "Ryan Morrison," I whispered. Behind Ryan came two uniformed officers and a woman in professional attire carrying a badge and a briefcase. The woman immediately moved toward Emma, while one of the officers began photographing the scene with a professional camera. Madison's hand was still raised above Emma, the crystal shard catching the light like a frozen moment of violence. For several seconds, nobody moved or spoke. The tableau was so surreal, a bride in white silk and pearls, threatening a child with a makeshift weapon, while police officers documented the scene, that it felt like something from a nightmare. "Drop the weapon," Ryan commanded in a voice that carried absolute authority. "Now." Madison's arm began to shake, but she didn't lower the crystal. "This is a private family matter. You have no right to be here." "We have every right," Ryan replied calmly. "We're executing a warrant in connection with an ongoing investigation into financial crimes and child endangerment." The woman with the briefcase had reached Emma and was kneeling beside her, speaking in soft, comforting tones while examining her injuries. She pulled out a small camera and began documenting the head wound, the bruises on Emma's arms, and the torn clothing. "I'm Lisa Chen from Child Protective Services," she told Emma gently. "You're safe now, sweetheart. These officers are here to help you." Carol's face had gone completely white. "What investigation? What are you talking about?" Ryan pulled out a badge that identified him as a financial crimes investigator with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. "Carol Henderson, you're under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes." "That's impossible," Carol sputtered. "I haven't done anything wrong. This is just a family disagreement about wedding expenses." One of the uniformed officers moved behind Carol and began reading her rights while producing handcuffs. Carol struggled against him, her voice rising to a shriek. "You can't do this. I'm a respected businesswoman. I know people in this town." Ryan's attention turned to Madison, who was still frozen with the crystal shard raised above Emma. "Madison Fleming, you're also under arrest for fraud, child abuse, and conspiracy." "Fleming!" I stared at Ryan in confusion. "Her name is Patterson. She's my sister." Ryan's expression was grim as he looked at me. "Sylvie, there's a lot you don't know about these people. Madison Fleming is Carol's biological daughter, not your sister. And Carol isn't your mother." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What are you talking about?" "Of course she's my mother. She's been in my life since I was 15. "Since your real mother died," Ryan corrected quietly. "Carol Fleming has been operating under the identity of Carol Patterson for over 15 years. Your real mother was Dorothy Patterson, and she died under suspicious circumstances that we've been investigating." Madison finally lowered the crystal shard, but her face had taken on an expression of calculating panic. "You can't prove any of this. It's all circumstantial evidence." Derek, who had been silent since the officers arrived, suddenly bolted for the door. One of the uniformed officers caught him before he could take 3 steps, tackling him to the ground with professional efficiency. "Derek Morrison," Ryan announced, "also under arrest as an accessory to fraud. And before you ask, yes, he's my younger brother, which is how we learned about this operation in the first place." The revelations were coming too fast for me to process. Derek was Ryan's brother. Carol wasn't my mother. Madison wasn't my sister. Lisa Chen had finished her preliminary examination of Emma and was helping her stand up carefully. "She has a significant head injury that needs immediate medical attention," she announced. "I'm calling an ambulance." "No," Madison screamed suddenly. "This is my wedding day. You can't ruin my wedding day." She lunged toward Emma again with the crystal shard, but Ryan was faster. He tackled Madison to the ground, the wedding dress tearing with a loud, ripping sound as she hit the marble floor. The crystal shard skittered away across the polished surface. "The wedding was never real," Ryan told Madison as he zip-tied her hands behind her back. "The officiant was an actor. Half the guests are performers you hired, and the groom is facing federal charges. There is no wedding." Sarah and Katie tried to slip toward the door, but the second uniformed officer was already waiting for them. "Sarah Miller and Katie Walsh," the officer announced. "You're both under arrest as accessories to fraud and child endangerment." As the handcuffs clicked into place around Sarah's wrists, she turned to me with a desperate expression. "Sylvie, you have to understand, we needed the money. Madison promised us $5,000 each if we helped convince you to pay for the wedding. We didn't know she was going to hurt Emma." "You stood there and watched a 9-year-old child get beaten," Ryan said coldly. "Your financial situation doesn't excuse that." The wedding planner, Jessica, was still standing in the doorway, her clipboard now forgotten as she stared at the scene in shock. "Should I tell the guests what's happening?" "Tell them the wedding is canceled and they should go home," Ryan instructed. "The venue will need to be processed as a crime scene." As the various conspirators were led away in handcuffs, Ryan knelt down beside where Emma and I were sitting. The paramedics had arrived and were checking Emma's head injury, but she seemed more alert now that the immediate threat was gone. "How did you know?" I asked Ryan. "How did you know to come here?" Ryan's expression softened as he looked at me. "Your bank flagged the suspicious transfers about 3 weeks ago. When they saw the pattern of small withdrawals escalating to larger amounts, they contacted our financial crimes unit. We've been investigating Carol and Madison for over a month." He pulled out a tablet and showed me surveillance photos of Carol and Madison meeting with various people discussing what appeared to be financial documents. "This isn't their first operation," Ryan explained. "They've been running long-term infiltration scams for years. Carol specializes in targeting single mothers or widows with substantial assets. She moves into their lives, gradually builds trust, gains access to their financial information, and then systematically drains their accounts." The pieces were falling into place, but I was still struggling to understand the full scope of what had happened to my family. "So Carol really isn't my mother?" Ryan shook his head sadly. "Your real mother was Dorothy Patterson. She died 15 years ago from what was ruled as natural causes, but we now suspect she was poisoned. Carol assumed her identity within months of Dorothy's death and moved in with you." The paramedics had finished their initial examination of Emma and determined that while her head injury was serious, it wasn't immediately life-threatening. She would need stitches and observation for possible concussion, but she was conscious and responsive. As they prepared to transport her to the hospital, Emma grabbed my hand tightly. "Mama, I'm scared," she whispered. "I don't understand what's happening. Why did Aunt Madison hurt me? Why are all these people being arrested?" I stroked her blood-matted hair gently, trying to find words that would make sense to a 9-year-old. "Sometimes people aren't who we think they are, sweetheart. The important thing is that you're safe now, and we're going to make sure no one ever hurts you again." Ryan approached us carefully, his expression softer than the authoritative demeanor he'd displayed during the arrests. "Emma, my name is Detective Morrison. I knew your mama when we were in high school together. I promise you that all the bad people who hurt you today are going to jail, where they can't hurt anyone else." Emma looked up at him with wide, solemn eyes. "Are you going to put Grandma Carol in jail too?" "Yes," Ryan said honestly. "Carol hurt you and your mama, and she's been hurting other families too. It's my job to stop people like that." As the paramedics wheeled Emma toward the ambulance, Ryan turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Sylvie, there's more. Things that are going to be difficult to hear, but you need to know the truth about what's been done to your family." We walked to a quiet corner of the country club's lobby while Lisa Chen finished documenting the crime scene. Ryan pulled out a thick file folder and opened it on a nearby table. "Carol Fleming has been operating this type of scam for over 20 years. He began. She targets families who have experienced recent trauma death of a spouse, serious illness, divorce, and positions herself as a helpful family friend or distant relative who wants to provide support. He showed me photographs of other women, other families. Some of the faces were familiar from news reports about missing persons or suspicious deaths. "She killed my mother," I said quietly. It wasn't a question. Ryan nodded grimly. "We believe so. Dorothy Patterson was a healthy 45-year-old woman with no history of heart problems. She died of what the coroner ruled as sudden cardiac arrest, but the symptoms Dorothy described to her doctor in the weeks before her death are consistent with antifreeze poisoning." The folder contained copies of medical records, police reports from the original investigation, and financial documents showing how Carol had systematically assumed Dorothy's identity after her death. Dorothy had a substantial life insurance policy, a retirement account, and she owned 3 properties in addition to the house you lived in, Ryan continued. Carol has been slowly liquidating those assets over the past 15 years, using the money to fund her various schemes. I thought about all the times Carol had helped with my finances, all the documents she'd handled, all the access I'd given her to my life and Emma's. She's been stealing from us for 15 years. Not just stealing, creating dependencies. Look at this. Ryan showed me a timeline that his team had constructed. It showed how Carol had gradually isolated me from other family members and friends, how she'd encouraged my relationship with Emma's father despite his obvious instability, how she'd been there to help when he abandoned us. "She wanted you to be dependent on her," Ryan explained. "The more isolated and vulnerable you became, the easier it was for her to maintain control and access to your resources." Lisa Chen joined us, having finished her preliminary report. "The child abuse investigation is straightforward," she said. "Emma's injuries are well documented, and we have multiple witnesses to the assault. But there are some financial irregularities that go back years." She pulled out her own tablet and showed me account records I'd never seen before. "Carol has been intercepting your tax returns and claiming Emma as a dependent on her own returns. She's been collecting child tax credits and using your daughter's Social Security number for various financial benefits." The scope of the deception was overwhelming. Carol hadn't just stolen money, she'd stolen our entire identity as a family. "There's something else," Ryan said quietly. "Madison isn't just Carol's daughter. She's been running her own operations targeting men for romance scams. Derek isn't her first fake fiancé." He showed me a collection of wedding photos, Madison in different dresses with different men at different venues. Some of the photos were recent, others went back several years. "She's been married 4 times in the past 3 years, Lisa explained. Each time she and Carol would identify wealthy men looking for love, usually recent divorcees or widowers. Madison would seduce them, plan elaborate weddings funded by their money, and then disappear after the ceremony with their assets. The men never reported it. Some did, but Madison and Carol were careful to choose victims who wouldn't want the embarrassment of admitting they'd been conned. Successful businessmen, politicians, community leaders. People who valued their reputations more than recovering the money. Ryan pulled out another photograph, this one showing Derek with a woman who wasn't Madison. Derek has been part of this operation for over 2 years. He poses as various professionals, financial advisor, lawyer, real estate agent, whatever role the scam requires. Today he was supposed to be the loving fiancé, but we've documented him in at least 6 different identities. The wedding planner, Jessica, approached our table hesitantly. "Excuse me, Detective Morrison. The venue manager wants to know what to do about the guests who are still waiting outside, and the caterers are demanding payment before they'll pack up their equipment." Ryan looked up from the files. "Tell the venue manager that this is now an active crime scene. All vendors should submit invoices to the FBI field office for reimbursement from seized assets. As for the guests..." He paused, considering, how many actual guests are there versus hired actors? Jessica consulted her clipboard. "Maybe 20 real people, family, friends, a few co-workers from Derek's supposed job. The rest were definitely hired. They kept asking me where craft services was set up." Tell the real guests that the wedding has been canceled due to criminal activity and they should contact the FBI if they have any questions. The actors can leave, but we'll need their contact information for the investigation." As Jessica hurried away, Ryan turned back to me. "Sylvie, there's one more thing about your mother's death." He pulled out a sealed evidence bag containing a small vial of clear liquid. "We found this in Carol's hotel room this morning when we executed the search warrant. It's ethylene glycol antifreeze. We believe she was planning to poison you." The blood drained from my face. "What?" "The wedding was supposed to be a distraction. While everyone was focused on Madison's big day, Carol planned to slip this into your drink. With you dead, she would have gained control of Emma as her legal guardian, and through Emma, access to your life insurance, your house, and Dorothy's remaining assets that you haven't learned about yet." Lisa Chen's expression was grave. "The custody documents we found in Carol's belongings show that she's been preparing to assume guardianship of Emma for months. She had forged papers naming herself as the preferred guardian, financial documentation showing her stable income, and character references from people we now know are part of her criminal network." I felt sick. "She was going to kill me and take Emma." "It's a pattern we've seen before," Ryan said sadly. "Carol eliminates the adult victim and gains control over any minor children. The children become sources of government benefits, insurance payouts, and eventually, when they're old enough, they're either recruited into the operation or disposed of if they become problems." The thought of Emma growing up under Carol's control being gradually twisted into another tool for criminal schemes made me physically ill. I ran to the nearest trash can and vomited up everything in my stomach. When I returned to the table, Ryan was putting the files away. The good news is that we caught them before Carol could execute the final phase of her plan. Emma is safe, you're safe, and we've recovered enough evidence to put the entire network away for life. What happens now? Now you and Emma go to the hospital, get her properly treated, and start the process of healing. Tomorrow, we'll need detailed statements from both of you, and there will be court proceedings over the next several months. But the immediate danger is over. Lisa Chen handed me her business card. "I'll be working with your family through the transition. Emma will need counseling to process what she's experienced, and there are legal procedures for reclaiming your stolen assets and establishing Emma's true identity in government records." As we prepared to leave for the hospital, Ryan caught my arm gently. "Sylvie, I'm sorry we didn't figure this out sooner. If I'd known what Dorothy's death really was 15 years ago..." I shook my head. "You saved us today. That's what matters." But as we walked toward the ambulance where Emma was waiting, I couldn't help but wonder how many other families Carol and Madison had destroyed over the years, and how many victims we might never know about. 3 days later, I sat in the FBI field office conference room with Emma beside me, both of us still processing the magnitude of what we'd learned. Emma's head wound had required 12 stitches, and she had a mild concussion, but physically, she was healing well. Emotionally, we both had a long road ahead. Ryan sat across from us with several thick folders and a laptop computer. Behind him, a whiteboard displayed what looked like a complex family tree with photographs connected by red string, the visual representation of Carol and Madison's criminal network. "The DNA results came back," Ryan announced, opening the first folder. "As we suspected, Carol Fleming has no biological relationship to you whatsoever. She's also not actually Carol Fleming." He pulled out an identification card with a photograph of a much younger Carol. "Her real name is Catherine Morgan. She's originally from Nevada, and she has a criminal record dating back 25 years. Identity theft fraud, and we've now linked her to at least 3 suspicious deaths in different states." Emma had been quietly coloring in a book Lisa Chen had given her, but she looked up at this news, so she was never really my grandma. "No, sweetheart," Ryan said gently. "She was just a bad person who pretended to be your grandmother so she could steal from your family." The second revelation was even more shocking. Ryan pulled out another DNA report, this one, with different highlighted sections. Madison Fleming is Carol's biological daughter, but she's also not actually 26 years old as she claimed. She's 34. She's been using false identification for over a decade. The photograph Ryan showed me was from Madison's arrest 15 years ago in California. She looked exactly the same, which made sense if she'd been using anti-aging treatments and careful makeup to maintain a younger appearance. She's been perfecting this wedding scam routine for years, Ryan continued. We've now identified 11 different men she's married in fake ceremonies across 6 states. The total amount stolen exceeds $800,000. Emma had stopped coloring and was listening intently. Despite her young age, she deserved to understand what had happened to our family. Derek Morrison, and yes, that's really his name, he's my half-brother, has been Madison's accomplice for 3 years. He's an unemployed actor who got involved with this group when he was struggling financially after our father's death. Ryan's expression was pained when he talked about Derek. I hadn't spoken to Derek in over 2 years. If I'd maintained a relationship with him, maybe I could have prevented his involvement in this. Lisa Chen, who was also present for this meeting, pulled out her own tablet. The child protection investigation has revealed some disturbing additional information. Carol has been systematically documenting Emma's daily activities, her school performance, her friendships, and her medical history. She showed me photographs Carol had taken of Emma without my knowledge. Pictures of her walking to school, playing at the park, even sleeping in her bed. The invasion of privacy felt almost as violating as the physical assault. She was building a case file to support her eventual guardianship petition, Lisa explained. Carol had already contacted 3 different lawyers about gaining custody of Emma, claiming that you were an unfit mother due to mental health issues. Ryan opened his laptop and showed me a document that made my blood run cold. It was a psychiatric evaluation report with my name on it, dated just 2 weeks earlier, claiming that I suffered from severe depression anxiety and had made threats of self-harm. This is completely fake, I said, scanning the fabricated medical assessment. I've never seen this doctor, never had this evaluation. The doctor doesn't exist either, Ryan confirmed. Carol has been creating false medical and psychological records as part of her long-term plan to gain control of Emma. She had documentation ready to prove that you were unstable and that Emma would be better off in her care. The sophisticated nature of the fraud was overwhelming. This wasn't just opportunistic theft. It was a methodical, multi-year operation designed to completely destroy my family and rebuild it according to Carol's criminal purposes. There's more, Lisa said quietly. Emma, sweetheart, do you remember your grandmother, Dorothy? Your mama's real mother. Emma nodded slowly. A little bit. She used to make pancakes with blueberries, and she had a garden with lots of flowers. Ryan smiled sadly. Dorothy left something for you and your mama, something Carol never knew about. He produced a key and a business card for a local bank. Dorothy had a safety deposit box that she rented under a different name, shortly before she died. Inside, we found a video message recorded 3 days before her death, along with financial documents Carol never discovered. My hands shook as I took the key. She knew what Carol was planning. Dorothy suspected Carol was poisoning her, but she didn't have proof. Instead of confronting Carol directly, she spent her final weeks setting up protection for you and Emma. Lisa pulled out a legal document with official seals and notarizations. Dorothy created a trust fund that would only activate if Carol was ever arrested or charged with a crime. The trust contains the proceeds from 3 life insurance policies Carol didn't know about, plus rental income from properties Dorothy owned in other states. The amount listed on the document made me gasp. $2.7 million. Your mother was much wealthier than Carol realized, Ryan explained. Dorothy had been quietly investing in acquiring real estate for decades. Carol only gained access to about 20% of Dorothy's actual assets. The rest has been sitting in this trust, waiting for you. Emma looked up from her coloring book with wide eyes. Does that mean I can still go to college? You can go to any college you want, I told her, tears streaming down my face. You can become a veterinarian or anything else you dream of. Ryan continued explaining the legal proceedings that would follow. Carol and Madison are facing federal charges that carry mandatory minimum sentences of 15 years. Derek will likely receive a shorter sentence in exchange for his cooperation, but he'll still serve significant prison time. The two women who had posed as bridesmaids, Sarah and Katie, were revealed to be career criminals who had worked with Madison on previous scams. The fake wedding photographer had been arrested at her hotel with equipment stolen from legitimate photography businesses. "What about the real victims?" I asked. "The men Madison scammed the families Carol infiltrated." Lisa opened another folder containing victim impact statements. "We've identified 47 families across 8 states who were targeted by this operation. The total financial damage exceeds $3 million. Many of the victims never realized they'd been scammed until we contacted them. One of the most disturbing revelations was that Carol had been systematically poisoning several elderly clients at her accounting business, slowly draining their accounts while their health declined. 4 deaths previously attributed to natural causes were now being investigated as homicides. The important thing," Ryan said, looking directly at Emma and me, "is that it's over. Carol will never be able to hurt your family again. Madison will never be able to victimize anyone else, and Emma will grow up knowing the truth about who she really is and where she comes from." As we prepared to leave the FBI office, Ryan handed me a thick envelope. "These are copies of Dorothy's letters to you. She wrote them over several months before she died, explaining your family history and expressing her love for you and Emma." That evening, Emma and I sat together in our living room, which we now knew we truly owned free and clear, and I read Dorothy's letters aloud. They painted a picture of a woman who had loved us fiercely and had spent her final months ensuring our future would be secure. "My dearest Sylvie." One letter began, "If you're reading this, then my suspicions about Carol were correct, and justice has finally been served. Know that every decision I made was to protect you and Emma. You are stronger than you realize, and Emma is destined for greatness. The money I've left you is not just financial security, it's freedom to build the life you both deserve without the shadows of deception and manipulation that have clouded your recent years." As Emma fell asleep in my arms that night, I realized that while we had lost the family we thought we had gained something more valuable, the truth and the opportunity to build a real family, based on genuine love rather than criminal exploitation. 6 months later, Emma and I stood in the garden of Dorothy's Victorian house, our house now watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. The house was everything Dorothy had described in her letters, 3 stories of gingerbread trim and wraparound porches, with a tower room that Emma had immediately claimed as her art studio. The transition hadn't been easy. Emma had needed months of counseling to process the trauma of that terrible wedding day, and I had struggled with feelings of guilt and betrayal as I learned the full extent of how thoroughly Carol had deceived us. But we were healing together. "Mama, look what I finished," Emma called from her easel where she'd been working on a watercolor painting of Dorothy's memorial garden. We had planted it in the spring with flowers mentioned in Dorothy's letters, lavender roses, and the bluebell ground cover that had been her favorite. Emma's painting was beautiful, full of life and color and hope. The girl who had cowered in terror 6 months ago had become confident and creative again, though she was also wiser now about the existence of evil in the world. "It's perfect, sweetheart," I told her, wrapping my arms around her as she leaned back against me. "Grandmother Dorothy would have loved it." The legal proceedings had concluded the previous month. Carol Catherine Morgan had been sentenced to life in prison, without possibility of parole for Dorothy's murder, plus additional sentences for fraud and child abuse. Madison received 35 years for her part in the various scams. Derek had cooperated fully with authorities and received a reduced sentence of 8 years, though Ryan had made it clear their relationship was permanently severed. The restitution process had been complex but ultimately successful. All 47 victim families had recovered their stolen assets plus damages. Emma's college fund was not only fully restored, but had grown substantially thanks to Dorothy's trust fund investments. More importantly, we had learned about Dorothy's real legacy. She had been a pioneering female entrepreneur who had built a small real estate empire while quietly supporting numerous charities that helped women and children escape dangerous situations. The trust fund she'd established in Emma's name wasn't just money, it was a continuation of her mission to protect vulnerable families. "I've decided what I want to study in college," Emma announced, adding delicate blue touches to the painted bluebells. "I still want to be a veterinarian, but I also want to study psychology and law. I want to help other kids who have been hurt by bad people pretending to be family." I smiled, not surprised by her decision. Emma had shown remarkable resilience and empathy throughout the recovery process, often asking about other victims and whether they were getting the help they needed. The doorbell rang, interrupting our peaceful evening. Through the front window, I could see Ryan's familiar silhouette on the front porch, holding what appeared to be a bottle of wine and a bouquet of flowers. Over the past 6 months, Ryan and I had slowly rekindled our connection. Our shared high school history provided a foundation of trust, but we were taking things carefully, especially considering Emma's need for stability and Ryan's complicated feelings about Derek's criminal activity. "Detective Ryan is here," Emma said happily, setting down her paintbrush. She had grown fond of Ryan, particularly appreciating his respectful way of answering her questions about the investigation and his genuine interest in her art. I opened the door to find Ryan dressed casually in jeans and a button-down shirt, his badge and gun notably absent. He'd taken to visiting us as simply Ryan Morrison, not FBI Agent Morrison when he wasn't working. "Perfect timing," I said, accepting the flowers, daisies, and sunflowers, Emma's current favorites. "We were just finishing Emma's latest masterpiece." Ryan examined Emma's painting with the serious attention he gave to everything that mattered to her. "The color gradations in those bluebells are incredible. You're becoming quite the artist." "I'm starting art lessons next week," Emma told him proudly. "Mama found a teacher who specializes in watercolors, and she said I have natural talent." As we settled on the front porch with glasses of lemonade and wine for the adults, Ryan updated us on the ongoing investigations stemming from our case. The accounting firm where Carol worked has been completely restructured under new management. They've discovered evidence that she was embezzling from business clients as well as individuals. The state attorney general is launching a comprehensive audit that could take years to complete. "Are there more victims than you originally thought?" I asked. Ryan nodded grimly. "Dozens. Some of the elderly clients she was slowly poisoning didn't die. They just became progressively sicker and more confused, making them easier to manipulate financially. Several families have come forward reporting suspicious changes in their relatives' wills and financial arrangements." Emma had been listening thoughtfully to this conversation. At 9 years old, almost 10 now, she understood more about criminal justice than most adults, having lived through the investigation and trial process. "Detective Ryan," she said seriously, "do you think there are other kids like me, kids whose families aren't really their families?" Ryan considered her question carefully before answering. "Unfortunately, yes. Family infiltration scams are more common than most people realize. But because of what happened to you and your mama, we've developed new training programs to help other police departments recognize the signs earlier." He had told us previously that our case had become a model for investigating long-term fraud operations, with Emma's courage in testifying helping to secure convictions that would protect other children. As the evening wound down, Ryan helped Emma set up her easel for the next day's painting session while I prepared dinner. The domestic scene felt natural and comfortable, though I remained cautious about making assumptions about the future. "Mama," Emma said, as I tucked her into bed that night in her new bedroom with its tower windows and built-in bookshelves, "are you happy now?" It was such a direct question that it took me a moment to formulate an honest answer. "I'm healing, sweetheart. We both are. And yes, I'm happy that we're safe, that we have a beautiful home, and that we know the truth about our real family. Are you happy?" Emma considered this seriously, as she did most things these days. I'm sad that Grandmother Dorothy died before I could really know her, and I'm angry at the people who pretended to love us but really just wanted to hurt us. But I'm happy that we found out the truth, and I'm happy that Detective Ryan is your friend, and I'm happy that I can paint whenever I want to now. After Emma fell asleep, I sat in Dorothy's study now, my study reading through more of the letters she'd left behind. One passage had become particularly meaningful to me. The greatest gift we can give our children is not money or material security, though those things matter. The greatest gift is teaching them to recognize genuine love and to trust their instincts when something feels wrong. Evil often comes disguised as help, as family, as love itself. But real love never demands that we sacrifice our children's well-being or our own integrity. Real love protects, nurtures, and creates space for growth and happiness. As I reflected on the past year, I realized that Dorothy's wisdom had ultimately saved us. By trusting my instincts that day in the bridal suite, by refusing to sacrifice Emma's future for Madison's manipulative demands, I had protected what truly mattered. The money Carol and Madison had stolen was just money. It could be replaced, as the trust fund had proven. But Emma's safety, her trust in me as her mother, her faith in the possibility of justice and healing, those things were irreplaceable. The nonprofit organization I'd started with part of Dorothy's inheritance was already helping 3 other families who had discovered they were victims of similar infiltration scams. Emma had insisted on naming it Dorothy's Garden, saying that Grandmother Dorothy's love kept growing and helping people even after she was gone. Looking ahead, I could see a future filled with possibilities we'd never imagined when we were trapped in Carol's web of lies. Emma would attend the best schools, pursue her dreams of becoming a veterinarian, an advocate for abused children, and grow up knowing she was cherished and protected. I would continue building the advocacy organization, perhaps return to school myself to better understand legal and financial protections for vulnerable families, and cautiously explore whether Ryan and I could build something lasting together. Most importantly, we would never again mistake manipulation for love or allow anyone to exploit our desire for family connection. We had learned to value truth over convenience, genuine affection over forced loyalty, and our own instincts over others' expectations. As I turned off the lights in Dorothy's house and checked the security system that now protected us, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the grandmother Emma had barely known, but who had loved us enough to ensure our freedom. Evil had touched our lives, but it had not conquered us. Justice had not only been served, it had opened the door to a future built on truth, love, and the unshakable bond between a mother and daughter who had survived the worst and discovered they were stronger than they'd ever imagined. Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who hurt us deepest, but that doesn't mean we should stop trusting altogether. It means we should trust wisely, love carefully, and never stop fighting for the family that truly matters. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was living a lie that affected your entire life? What would you do if you found out that the people you considered family had been systematically betraying you for years? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of the importance of protecting the people you love, please give it a like and subscribe for more stories about families overcoming betrayal and finding justice. And don't forget to share this with someone who might need to hear that they're stronger than whatever they're facing. Thank you for listening to our journey, and remember, real love always protects what matters most.